The scimitar slices through the air, wet with the blood of a Byzantine defender. It is the 29th of May, 1453, and the world is ending. The Theodosian walls, the triple-layered shield that protected Constantinople for 1,000 years, have finally shattered. Pouring through the breach is a tide of white caps and red velvet, the Janissaries. The Sultan's shadow. They fight with a silence that is more terrifying than the screams of the dying. They move like a single organism, a machine of flesh and steel engineered for one purpose: total conquest. Leading the charge is a soldier we'll call Mahmud. He is 25 years old. He is a master of the composite bow, a scholar of the Quran, and he worships Sultan Mehmed II as the shadow of God on earth. As he steps over the body of a Greek priest to plant the Ottoman standard on the Roman walls, he feels a surge of divine ecstasy. He is the sword of Islam, but freeze the frame right there. Look closely at Mahmud's face. Look at the bone structure. Look at the eyes. Mahmud isn't Turkish. 20 years ago, his name was Nikolas. He was a Christian boy living in a small fishing village outside Thessaloniki. He didn't speak a word of Turkish. He didn't know who the Sultan was. He spent his days mending nets with his father and running through olive groves. He was someone's son. He was someone's future, until the day the drums sounded in the village square. What happened between the olive grove and the burning walls of Constantinople is one of the darkest, most brilliant, and most terrifying experiments in human history. The Ottoman Empire didn't just conquer land. They conquered biology. They realized that the most dangerous weapon wasn't a cannon or a catapult. It was a child. If you could take a child, strip away his family, his God, his name, and his memory, you could rebuild him into something indestructible. Mahmud is not a traitor. He is a masterpiece of psychological engineering. And to understand how Nikolas became Mahmud, how a stolen child became the destroyer of his own people, we have to go back to the moment the nightmare began. We have to go back to the harvest. Rewind to 1432, the Balkans. This is the frontier of the Ottoman expansion, a patchwork of conquered Christian lands, Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, Albanians. They are subjects of the Sultan, allowed to keep their religion and their customs, provided they pay the jizya, the tax on non-Muslims. But every few years, sometimes every 3, sometimes every 5, depending on the Sultan's need for manpower, a different kind of tax collector arrives. The villagers call it the Devshirme, the gathering, the blood tax. It doesn't start with violence. It starts with bureaucracy. A rider enters the village weeks in advance, carrying a firman a royal decree sealed with the Sultan's tugra, his intricate calligraphy signature. The decree is posted on the church door. It is simple, legal, and non-negotiable. The Sultan requires new servants. Panic is immediate. It spreads like a virus through the valleys. Mothers look at their sons, boys between the ages of 8 and 18, and they start doing the unthinkable. In the weeks before the collectors arrive, the villages transform into theatres of desperation. Fathers take stones and smash the hands of their sons, crippling them. Mothers mix herbs to create rashes that mimic leprosy. Some families rush to marry off their 12-year-olds because married boys are exempt. Others beg the village priest to alter the baptismal records, changing a healthy 10-year-old into a sickly 5-year-old, or an aged 20-year-old. They are trying to damage their own children just enough to save them, because the Ottomans don't want damaged goods. They want the best. The day the collectors arrive is etched into the collective trauma of the Balkans. You can hear them before you see them. The slow, rhythmic beating of a drum. The march of the escort guard, Janissaries. Tall, silent, terrifying, because everyone knows these men were once us. Leading them is the Turnagi Bashi, the head keeper of the cranes, or a high-ranking scout officer. He wears a scarlet tunic and a tall white felt cap. He doesn't carry a whip. He carries a ledger. He sets up a table in the village square. He summons the priest. This is the first layer of the psychological horror, the collaboration. The priest, the man who baptized these boys, the man who is supposed to be their spiritual shepherd, is forced to bring the baptismal registry. He becomes the clerk of the abduction. He stands next to the Ottoman officer, reading out the names of the flock, calling them forward one by one to be inspected like livestock. Nikolas, son of Petros, a 10-year-old boy, steps forward. He is terrified. He's gripping his father's hand so tight his knuckles are white. The officer separates them with a gesture. The inspection is clinical. This is not a random kidnapping. It is a genetic filter. The officer looks at the boy's eyes clear. Intelligent? Good. He checks the teeth. He feels the muscles in the arms and legs. He looks for scars, birthmarks, any sign of weakness. They have specific manuals for this. Physiognomy guides that claim to predict a boy's character from his physical features. A boy with a cat-like face is deceptive. A boy with a large forehead is intelligent but lazy. They are looking for the perfect clay. There are rules, strictly enforced by Islamic law. They cannot take an only son because that would destroy the family's economic survival, and the empire needs taxpayers. They cannot take the son of a widow because who would care for her? They cannot take orphans because an orphan has no roots, and the Ottomans believe a boy needs to have known love to be capable of loyalty. They cannot take boys who speak Turkish because the erasure must be total. Nikolas passes the test. He is healthy, strong, intelligent. He has brothers, so he is spare. The officer nods. A scribe dips a reed pen into ink and writes Nikolas's name in the ledger. Next to it, he writes a description. Fair hair, mole on left cheek, grey eyes. And just like that, Nikolas is government property. The moment of separation is violent in its finality. There are no long goodbyes allowed. The Janissary guards step in. They pull the boy from his mother's arms. The wailing of the women in these villages was so distinctive, so haunting, that travellers wrote about hearing it from miles away. It was a funeral keening, a mourning for the living. They dressed the chosen boys immediately in red tunics. This is their first uniform. It marks them. It tells the world, do not touch this child. He belongs to the Sultan. In a single afternoon, a village might lose 10, 20, or 30 of its brightest, strongest youth. The flower of the generation is plucked, and then the drum sounds again. The column moves on. Nikolas looks back over his shoulder. He sees his mother collapsing in the dust. He sees his father standing frozen, helpless. He sees the church, the olive trees, the ocean. He doesn't know it yet, but he is looking at them for the last time. He is 10 years old, and he is walking into a void. The journey to Constantinople is the first stage of the breaking process. It is a death march for the soul. Thousands of boys are gathered from across the provinces, Greece, Albania, Bosnia, Serbia. They are herded into long columns, hundreds deep. They walk for weeks. The physical exertion is calculated. It exhausts them, drains the fight out of them. They are fed, they are watered, but they are watched constantly. During this march, the first psychological shift happens. The boys are terrified, yes, but they are also surrounded by other boys just like them. They are suffering together. The bonds of the village are severed, replaced by the bonds of the column. They start to look not to their parents for safety, but to the red tunic next to them. But the empire is careful. They know these boys are dangerous. They are the sons of enemies. If you treat them like slaves, they will hate you. If you treat them like prisoners, they will rebel. So, the Ottomans do something insidious. They treat them like princes. As they get closer to the capital, the treatment shifts. The guards stop being jailers and start becoming mentors. They point to the horizon. Do you see that city? They whisper. The red apple, the center of the world. It is waiting for you. They tell the boys stories. In your village, you would have been a fisherman like your father. You would have smelled of fish guts and died poor. In the Sultan's service, you can become a general, a governor, a grand vizier. You can rule the world. It is a poison coated in honey. For a peasant boy in the 15th century, social mobility didn't exist. You were born a peasant, you died a peasant. The Ottoman Empire was offering them the impossible, a meritocracy. All you had to give up was everything. Finally, they reached the water, the Bosporus Strait, the narrow strip of blue that separates Europe from Asia, the past from the future. Nikolas steps onto the ferry. The air smells different here, spices, salt, and the smoke of 1,000 charcoal fires. Across the water, the skyline of Constantinople rises like a hallucination. Domes covered in lead, minarets piercing the sky, palaces of marble. It is overwhelming. It makes his village look like a collection of mud huts. The grandeur of the state is designed to make the individual feel small, to crush his ego so it can be rebuilt. The ferry docks. The boys are marched off. They are lined up in a vast courtyard. Thousands of them, a sea of red tunics. They are tired. They are dirty. They are scared. And now, the second selection begins. The first selection in the village was for the body. This selection is for the mind. Roaming among the rows of boys are the white eunuchs, the gatekeepers of the palace. These are men who have been castrated, men who have no family, no loyalty but to the Sultan. They are the ultimate insiders. They walk through the lines with terrifying precision. They are looking for the ikoglani, the inside boys. They look for a spark in the eyes, intelligence, grace, beauty, a specific kind of sharpness. These boys, maybe only 10% of the group, will not become soldiers. They are destined for the Topkapi Palace School. They will be educated to become the administrators of the empire. They will run the treasury, govern the provinces, and stand at the Sultan's right hand. Nikolas holds his breath. The eunuch stops in front of him, looks him up and down, tilts his chin up with a long, manicured fingernail. The eunuch pauses and then moves on. Nikolas has not been chosen for the palace. He has been chosen for the sword. He is destined for the Asemioglan, the novice corps. He will not learn poetry and calligraphy in the cool shade of the palace gardens. He will learn to kill. But not yet. The Ottomans know that you cannot just hand a sword to a Christian boy and expect him to fight for Islam. The programming isn't deep enough yet. He still remembers his prayers. He still thinks in Greek. So, they send him away. This is the part of the system that is often overlooked, but it is the genius of the machine. The boys, destined for the military, are not sent to barracks. They are sent to the Turkish countryside. Nikolas is assigned to a Turkish family in Anatolia, a Muslim farmer. Here, the officials say to the farmer, this is the Sultan's property. Use him for labor, work him hard. But if he breaks, you answer to us. And most importantly, teach him. For the next 5 to 7 years, Nikolas lives the life of a Turkish peasant. This is total immersion. There are no other Greeks around him. If he wants to eat, he must ask in Turkish. If he wants to understand his tasks, he must learn the language. Slowly, the Greek words fade. The memories of the liturgy are replaced by the call to prayer from the local minaret, 5 times a day, rhythmic, hypnotic. He works the land under the hot Anatolian sun. He grows strong. His shoulders broaden. The soft fat of childhood burns away, replaced by lean muscle. He learns to endure hunger, heat, and cold. But the most important change is internal. The Turkish family treats him not exactly as a slave, but as a foster son of lower status. He eats with them. He adopts their customs. He sees their piety. He begins to understand their world not as the enemy, but as the reality. He stops being Nikolas. He becomes something in between. And then, one day, the official returns. The boy who stands before the official is not the weeping child from the village. He is 17 years old now. He speaks flawless Turkish. He is hard as oak. He has forgotten the sound of his mother's voice. It is time, the official says. He is brought back to the capital. The final transformation is about to begin. The circumcision, the conversion, the barracks. He enters the Asimi Oglan Corps, the novice boys. Here, the discipline makes the Spartans look soft. They sleep in long barracks, hundreds to a room. They are forbidden to speak at night. They are forbidden to gamble, to drink, to fight. They are given a daily allowance, just enough to buy bread and soup. They are constantly hungry. This is deliberate. A full dog sleeps. A hungry dog hunts. They are worked until they collapse, carrying stones for construction, rowing on the galleys until their hands are raw meat, working in the Sultan's gardens. And through it all, the indoctrination intensifies. They are introduced to the Bektashi dervishes, a mystic Sufi order that serves as the spiritual chaplains of the Janissaries. The dervishes don't teach the dry, legalistic Islam of the courts. They teach a warrior faith. They teach that the Sultan is a holy figure. They teach that death in battle is not an end, but a door to paradise. They give the boys a new family structure. The commander is your Baba, father. The barracks is your Okak, hearth, home. The spoon you eat with is a sacred object because it symbolizes the Sultan's bounty. The cauldron where your soup is cooked is your altar. They are replacing the biological family with the military family. And finally, the moment comes. The moment Nikolas officially dies. He stands before the Imam. He raises his right index finger. He recites the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. He is given a new name, Mahmud. He's given a tall felt cap with a sleeve that hangs down the back, symbolizing the sleeve of Haji Bektash, the founder of their order, resting on their shoulder, a constant blessing. He is no longer a Christian. He is no longer a Greek. He is no longer a slave in the traditional sense. He is a kapikulu, a slave of the port. He belongs to a brotherhood that is feared from Vienna to Baghdad. He has brothers who will die for him. He has a father who rules the world. He has a purpose. But the system has one final test, the ultimate proof of loyalty. Mahmud is sent on his first campaign. The army marches west. They are marching toward the Balkans. They are marching toward Greece. Mahmud is going home. But he isn't going to visit. He's going to conquer. As the army passes through the familiar landscapes, the olive groves, the rocky hills, does he remember? Does his heart race? The genius of the Ottoman system is that by the time Mahmud sees a Greek village again, he doesn't see home. He sees a target. He looks at the Christian peasants, people who look like his father, women who dress like his mother, and he feels nothing but contempt. They are infidels. They are weak. They are sheep. He is the wolf. This is the psychological break complete. The victim has identified so completely with the aggressor that he has become the aggressor. And this brings us back to the wall. 1453. When Mahmud climbs that ladder, when he swings that scimitar, he isn't just fighting for land. He is fighting to validate his own existence. Every Christian he kills is proof that he is one of the chosen. Every step he takes into the burning city is a step away from Nikolas. But here is the question that haunts the history books, the question that the Ottoman sultans tried to ignore for centuries. You can change a name, you can change a religion, you can change a language, but can you ever truly kill the memory of a mother's love? Because deep down, beneath the layers of indoctrination, beneath the red velvet and the white felt cap, Nikolas is still in there, waiting. And 400 years later, when the empire begins to rot, it won't be foreign armies that destroy it. It will be the children. The red apple has been bitten. Now, let's see what happens when the poison sets in. While Mahmud was hardening his body in the mud of an Anatolian farm, eating lentil soup and sleeping on straw, a different fate awaited the chosen few. Remember the Ikoglani, the inside boys, the top 10% selected by the white eunuchs for their intelligence and beauty. Their journey didn't end in a barracks. It ended in the most exclusive, secretive, and high-pressure educational institution the world has ever seen, the Enderun School, located deep inside the third court of the Topkapi Palace. If the Janissary core was the empire's muscle, the Enderun was its brain. Walking into the third court was like stepping onto another planet. It was the House of Felicity. Silence was mandatory here. Even the servants used a complex sign language to avoid disturbing the Sultan's peace. The air smelled of roses, musk, and fear. The boys who entered these gates were stripped of their pasts, even more aggressively than the soldiers. They were given new names, new clothes, and a new reality. They were told, very clearly, you are no longer the son of a shepherd, you are the shadow of God. This wasn't just a school, it was an incubator for the ruling elite. The curriculum makes modern Ivy League universities look like kindergartens. These peasant boys, who had likely never held a book before, were subjected to a rigorous intellectual bombardment. They mastered Arabic, the language of religion. They mastered Persian, the language of poetry and literature. They mastered Turkish, the language of administration and command. They studied mathematics, astronomy, geometry, architecture, and music. They memorized the Quran until it was woven into their neural pathways. They learned the art of conversation, how to hold a coffee cup, how to interpret an arched eyebrow, how to kill a man with a bowstring, and how to write a poem that would make a grown man weep. They were being engineered into Renaissance men, decades before the Italian Renaissance reached its peak. But the genius of the system wasn't what they learned, it was how they lived. They were watched. Constantly. The discipline in the palace school makes the concept of privacy laughably obsolete. The boys slept in long dormitories with lights burning all night. Eunuchs patrolled the aisles, watching for any sign of immorality or sedition. Every conversation was monitored. Every friendship was noted. This created a specific psychological profile, the perfect courtier, outwardly, serene, polite, cultured, obedient, inwardly, hyper-alert, calculating, paranoid, and fiercely competitive. Because here is the hook that kept them loyal: unlimited ambition. In Europe at this time, if you were born a peasant, you died a peasant. If your father was a shoemaker, you were a shoemaker. The ceiling was concrete. In the Ottoman system, the ceiling didn't exist. A stolen Christian boy could look at the Grand Vizier, the man standing next to the Sultan, the man running the entire empire, and say, "That could be me," and he would be right. Because the Ottomans had realized a terrifying truth about power: aristocrats are dangerous. If you give power to old, noble families, they will eventually try to overthrow you. They have their own money, their own lands, their own loyalties. But a slave has nothing. A slave has no family to back him up, no lands to retreat to, no name to protect. His entire existence depends on the Sultan's favor. If the Sultan loves him, he owns the world. If the Sultan frowns, he is nothing. This created a loyalty so pure, so desperate, that it allowed the Ottoman sultans to sleep at night. They were surrounded by men who needed them to breathe. To understand how high these boys could rise, and the tragic price they paid for it, we have to look at the ultimate product of this system, the poster child of the Devshirme, Ibrahim of Parga. Ibrahim was born around 1,493 inches, Parga, a Venetian outpost on the coast of Greece. He was the son of a fisherman. He was a bright kid, musical, played the violin. Like Nikolas, Mahmud, he was taken. But Ibrahim's path was special. He wasn't just sent to a farm. He was sold into the household of a young provincial governor in Manisa. That governor's name was Suleiman, the man who would become Suleiman the Magnificent. This is where history turns into a movie script. Suleiman is the heir to the throne. He is lonely, intelligent, burdened by destiny. Ibrahim is his slave. He is brilliant, charming, musical, and speaks multiple languages. They become soulmates. There is no other word for it. They are inseparable. They hunt together, eat together, sleep in the same tent, discuss philosophy late into the night. Ibrahim plays the violin while Suleiman reads. When Suleiman becomes Sultan in 1520, he brings Ibrahim to Istanbul, and then he breaks every rule in the book. Usually, a slave has to work his way up the ladder for decades. Suleiman looks at Ibrahim and says, "No, you are the Grand Vizier." Imagine the shock in the court. Imagine the rage of the old Turkish pashas. A Greek fisherman's son, a slave, a convert, holding the imperial seal, commanding the armies of Islam, standing above men whose ancestors rode with Genghis Khan. Yes, Ibrahim Pasha becomes the most powerful man in the world, second only to Suleiman. He is the alter ego of the Sultan. European ambassadors ride home in shock. If you want anything done in this empire, you must go to the slave, not the Sultan. Ibrahim builds a palace that rivals the Sultan's. He wears suits of gold. He commands the reverence of millions. He marries the Sultan's own sister. He has achieved the impossible. He has transcended his birth, his religion, and his station. But, do you remember the rule? He is still a slave. There is a story that perfectly captures the golden cage these men lived in. One night, Ibrahim wakes up in a cold sweat. He goes to Suleiman and begs him, "My Sultan, do not promote me any further. Do not give me more power. I am afraid." Suleiman asks why. Ibrahim says, "Because the higher I climb, the closer I am to the fall, and the fall means death." Suleiman, in a moment of extraordinary love, swears an oath. He swears by Allah that as long as he lives, Ibrahim will never be executed. He gives him a firman decree of eternal protection. Ibrahim relaxes. He thinks he has beaten the system. He thinks he is safe. But the system is designed to prevent exactly this kind of safety. The logic of the Devshirme is cold. The slave exists to serve. When the slave begins to think he is a partner, he becomes a cancer. As the years pass, Ibrahim forgets. He forgets that he is Nikolas, Mahmud's counterpart. He forgets the Turnaji Bashi, who checked his teeth. He starts signing his letters as the Sultangent Maker. He starts telling ambassadors, "It is I who rules this empire. The Sultan is the lion, but I am the tamer. He becomes arrogant, and arrogance in a slave is a capital offense. We will come back to Ibrahim's fate, but first, we need to understand the machine he was controlling. By the mid-1500s, this system, the Janissaries on the battlefield, and the Devshirme administrators in the palace, had created a superpower. The Ottoman Empire was a meritocracy of the stolen. It was efficient because it was ruthless. If a general failed in battle, he wasn't reassigned. He was strangled. If a treasurer embezzled money, he wasn't fined. He was beheaded. The sword of the Sultan never sleeps. This created a government of terrifying competence. While European kings were stuck dealing with their idiotic cousins who inherited titles by blood, the Sultan was surrounded by the smartest men of their generation, handpicked from millions, trained for decades, and motivated by the terror of death. But there was a flaw, a tiny crack in the foundation, and it goes back to that concept of the family. Remember the rule: celibacy. Janissaries were forbidden to marry until they retired, around age 40. Palace officials were discouraged from forming deep family roots. Why? Because a man with a wife and children has divided loyalties. He worries about his son's inheritance, not the Sultan's glory. He steals from the treasury to build a nest egg for his family. The Sultan wanted them to be monks of war. The state was their father. The state was their heir. When a Grand Vizier died, his wealth didn't go to his children. It went back to the Sultan. You came from nothing. You returned to nothing. It was a perfect, closed loop. The wealth circulated, but never settled. The power was borrowed, never owned. But biology is stubborn. Men want to leave a legacy. It is the most primal human drive to see yourself continue in your children. You can brainwash a boy. You can rename him. You can give him a sword or a golden seal. But you cannot completely kill the desire to be a father. And slowly, inevitably, the monks of war began to look for loopholes. They started asking, why shouldn't my son be a Janissary? Why shouldn't my son inherit my position? I have bled for this empire. Do I not deserve to leave something behind? In the barracks of the Janissaries, the discipline began to slip. Secret wives, hidden children. In the palace, the corruption began to sprout. Bribes to ensure a son got a good post. The open loop of human nature was about to collide with the closed system of the empire. But before the rot sets in, we have to see the machine at its absolute peak. We have to see what happens when you take these two distinct products, the fanatic soldier, Mahmud, and the genius administrator, Ibrahim, and point them at the heart of Europe. If you want to see the harvest of the children functioning at its absolute peak, the moment where the investment of stolen boys paid its terrifying dividends, you have to look at the date, the 29th of August 1526, the Battle of Mohacs. On one side, King Louis II of Hungary, the flower of European chivalry. Heavily armoured knights, noble cavalry, men who have trained in the art of war since birth, fighting for their land, their king, and their god. On the other side, Sultan Suleiman, and in front of him, standing like a wall of white felt and blue steel, the Janissaries. The battle that followed changed the map of the world forever. It lasted 2 hours. Some historians say less. The Hungarian knights charged. It was a brave, thunderous, medieval charge. They expected to smash into a disorganized line of infantry. Instead, they hit the human fortress. The Janissaries didn't flinch. They didn't break. They simply opened fire. By 1526, the Janissaries had become the first modern standing army in the world to master firearms on a mass scale. While European armies were still debating the honor of the sword versus the cowardice of the gun, the Ottomans had industrialized the musket. The volley was devastating. The knights fell in waves, and when the smoke cleared, the Janissaries didn't celebrate. They didn't break ranks to loot. They simply reloaded. Discipline. Silence. Order. The Hungarian army was annihilated. The king drowned in a creek trying to escape. The Kingdom of Hungary ceased to exist as a sovereign power for centuries. This was the Golden Age. The system worked. The stolen boys had destroyed the armies of their former co-religionists without blinking. But to understand why they fought like this, why they were willing to stand still in the face of a cavalry charge, we have to look inside the barracks. We have to look at the Kazan. In the Janissary Corps, the most sacred object wasn't the sword or the Quran. It was the cauldron, the Kazan. This massive copper pot, where their daily soup and pilaf were cooked, was the totem of their existence. It represented the Sultan's mercy. "I feed you," the Sultan was saying, "and in return, you give me your life." Everything in the Janissary hierarchy was based on kitchen terms. The commander was the korbashi, the soup maker. The officers were the asibasi, the head cook. The hat they wore held a wooden spoon in the brim, like a medal of honor. Gathering around the cauldron to eat was a sacrament. It was communion. It reinforced the idea that they were brothers, fed by the same father, bound by the same bread. But the cauldron had a double meaning. It was a symbol of loyalty, yes, but it was also the barometer of the empire's stability. If the Janissaries were unhappy if their pay was late, if the campaign was too long, if the Sultan showed weakness, they wouldn't write a petition, they wouldn't go on strike. They would march to the parade ground, and they would overturn the cauldron. The moment the cauldron hit the dirt, spilling the Sultan's soup into the mud, the empire stopped breathing. It was the universal signal of mutiny. We reject your food. We reject your authority. When the cauldron was overturned, viziers lost their heads. Sometimes, sultans lost their heads. It was the first sign that the weapon had a mind of its own. You can train a dog to attack your enemies, but if you starve the dog, eventually it looks at your throat. And in the 1,530 seconds, the dog began to notice that the master was breaking the rules. We have to go back to Ibrahim Pasha, the Greek fisherman's son, the Grand Vizier, the man who thought he had escaped the cage. Remember Suleiman's promise? "As long as I live, you shall not die." Ibrahim believed it. He became more arrogant. He started calling himself Sultan in whispers. He made enemies of the Sultan's wife, the legendary Roxolana Hurrem Sultan, another slave who had risen to power. Roxolana whispered in Suleiman's ear, "He's getting too strong. He mocks you. He calls himself the true ruler." Suleiman was torn. He loved Ibrahim. This was his best friend, his soulmate. But Suleiman was also the Padishah, the emperor. And in the logic of the Ottoman state, no individual is more important than the survival of the dynasty. Ibrahim had grown too tall. He was casting a shadow over the throne. Suleiman had a problem. He had sworn an oath not to kill Ibrahim while he lived. So, he went to the chief religious judge, the Ebusud Effendi. He asked for a fatwa. "How can I kill a man I swore to protect without breaking my oath to Allah?" The judge found a loophole. "Sleep," the judge said, "is the brother of death." When a man is asleep, he is not fully alive in the legal sense. His consciousness is gone. Therefore, if you kill him while he sleeps, you have not broken your oath. It is a chilling legalistic gymnastics, characteristic of the time. The 15th of March, 1536. It is Ramadan. Ibrahim is invited to the palace for dinner. He eats with Suleiman. They laugh. They talk about old times in Manisa. They discuss the campaigns they won together. Suleiman asks him to stay the night in the palace, in the room next to his. Ibrahim agrees. He feels safe. The Sultan is his friend. He goes to sleep. In the middle of the night, the door opens. It is not soldiers who enter. It is the mutes, the palace executioners, who have had their tongues removed so they cannot reveal secrets, and their eardrums pierced so they cannot hear pleas for mercy. They carry a bowstring. The struggle was violent. Sources say that for years afterwards, you could see the blood splashes on the walls of that room. Ibrahim was strong. He fought for his life. He surely screamed for Suleiman. And Suleiman? He was in the next room, awake, listening to his best friend die. In the morning, Ibrahim's body was placed outside the palace gates. A black mark, no funeral, no honors, all his wealth confiscated. The message to every other convert in the empire was crystal clear. It does not matter how high you rise. It does not matter if you conquer Hungary. It does not matter if you are the Grand Vizier. You are a slave, and you can be unmade in a heartbeat. This moment sent a shockwave through the system. The Janissaries and the Pashas saw it, and something shifted in their psychology. If loyalty doesn't guarantee safety, then why be loyal? If the Sultan can kill the greatest of us on a whim, then we must protect ourselves. We must become stronger than the Sultan. The era of selfless service died that night with Ibrahim. The era of survival began. But the tragedy of the Devshirme wasn't just in the palace. It was personal. Let's look at the emotional cost of this system one last time. Imagine a Janissary. Let's call him Yusuf now. He is 40 years old. He is a senior officer. He has survived Mohacs. He has survived the siege of Vienna. He is permitted, finally, to take a leave of absence. He decides to do the one thing he has dreamed of for 30 years. He goes back to the village. He rides a fine Arabian horse. He wears the velvet robes of a conqueror. He has gold in his saddlebags. He rides into the little Christian village in the Balkans. He finds the house. It's smaller than he remembered. He knocks on the door. An old woman answers. Her face is lined with grief and labor. She looks at this terrifying Turkish soldier and bows, trembling. She thinks he is there to tax them or kill them. He looks at her. He sees the eyes. His eyes. Mother, he says in broken, rusty Greek. It is me, Nikolas. The reunion scenes described in the few chronicles we have are shattering. Sometimes there is joy, but often there is a terrible, unbridgeable chasm. He offers them gold. They take it, but they look at him with fear. He goes to the church. He cannot enter. He is a Muslim. He tries to talk to his brothers. They are poor farmers, illiterate, aged by sun and toil. He is a refined, wealthy, educated man of the world. They have nothing to talk about. He realizes that Nikolas died 30 years ago. He realizes that he has more in common with the Turkish soldier standing guard at the city gate than he does with the woman who gave birth to him. He is a stranger in his own home. He leaves the gold on the table and rides away. He never comes back. He returns to the barracks, to the cauldron, to the core, and he realizes, this is my family. This is my tribe, and I will do anything to protect it, even if I have to burn the empire down. This psychological hardening is what leads to the final catastrophe, because the Janissaries, having realized they are orphans of history, decide to secure their future the only way they know how. They start to change the rules. Late 16th century, the discipline begins to crack. It starts with a simple request. My son, a Janissary captain says, he is a good boy. Why must he be a shopkeeper? Why can't he take my place in the corps? The old rules said, no, the Janissaries must be recruited from the Christians, fresh blood only. But the pressure is too high. The Janissaries are too powerful. The Sultan blinks. Fine, he says. Let the sons of Janissaries enter the corps. This is the end. It sounds like a small administrative change. It is actually the death warrant of the Ottoman Empire. Why? Because the Devshirme worked because it was a meritocracy of strangers. It brought in fresh, hungry, talented boys who had no connections. Once you let the sons in, it becomes a hereditary caste. It becomes a mafia. The sons don't have the discipline of the converts. They grew up in Istanbul, street smart, entitled, soft. They don't want to drill. They don't want to march to the Austrian border in the snow. They want the salary. They want the tax exemptions. They want the power. By the 1600s, the Janissary Corps balloons from 12,000 elite terminators to 40,000 to 100,000. But they aren't soldiers anymore. They are shopkeepers who show up on payday. They are gangsters who run protection rackets in the bazaars of Istanbul. You want to sell carpets here? You pay the 56th Regiment. You want to open a bakery? You pay the 23rd Regiment. And God help the Sultan who tries to stop them. The shadow of God becomes a hostage in his own palace. When Sultan Osman II, a teenager, barely 17 years old, tries to shut them down in 1622, tries to build a new army to replace them, they drag him out of his bed. They drag him through the streets. They strangle him in the Seven Towers fortress. They squeeze his testicles until he dies. The children have killed the father. The weapon has turned in the hand. The Kazan has been overturned. And this time, it cannot be put back upright. For the next 2 centuries, the Ottoman Empire becomes the sick man of Europe. Not because it lacks land, or money, or people, but because its heart, the elite machine that drove its conquest, has become a cancer. The Janissaries become the greatest obstacle to progress. Every time a sultan tries to modernize, to buy new cannons, to bring in European instructors, the Janissaries riot. This is against the old ways, they scream, overturning their cauldrons. They hold the empire hostage for 200 years, until one man decides that the only way to save the patient is to cut the heart out. This brings us to the final act, the slaughter, the Vaka-e-Hayriya, the auspicious incident, a nice name for a massacre. It is 1,800 and 26. And the final bill for the stolen children is about to be paid in blood. By the summer of 1826, the golden cage had rusted shut. The machine that once produced the world's deadliest warriors was now producing nothing but extortion, chaos, and defeat. The Janissaries had become the masters of Istanbul. They didn't fight wars anymore, they refused to march. Why die in the snows of Russia when you could sit in a coffee house in Constantinople, collecting protection money? They had become a state within a state, a tumor that was slowly strangling the host. They had murdered 4 sultans. They had deposed countless viziers. They held the entire population of the capital in a grip of terror. If a Janissary wanted your house, he took it. If he wanted your daughter, he took her. If you complained, you were found floating in the Bosphorus. The lion of Islam had become a hyena. But sitting in the Topkapi Palace was a man who had been watching, waiting, planning. Sultan Mahmud II. Mahmud II is one of the most fascinating figures in Ottoman history. He was a survivor. As a young man, he had barely escaped being murdered by the Janissaries himself. He had to hide on a roof while they killed his cousin, Sultan Selim III. He never forgot that fear, and he never forgave. For 18 years, Mahmud played the fool. He smiled at the Janissary officers. He paid their exorbitant salaries. He complimented their bravery. He let them think he was weak, pliable, just another puppet sultan. But in secret, he was building a trap. He knew he couldn't just issue a decree. Sultan Osman II had tried that, and they crushed his testicles. No, to kill a monster this big, you needed more than a sword. You needed the people, and you needed God. Mahmud spent years quietly placing his own loyal men in key positions: the artillery corps, the navy, the religious scholars, ulama. He built a small, modern unit called the Eshkinsi, the active ones, trained in European style. Then, on the 15th of June 1826, he pulled the trigger. He announced that the new unit would begin drilling. He knew exactly what would happen. It was clockwork. That night, the cauldrons were overturned. "We will not accept the infidel drill," they screamed. "We want the head of the Grand Vizier. We want the head of the Sultan." They marched toward the palace, just as they had done for centuries. They expected the Sultan to panic. They expected the gates to open, the heads to roll, the gold to flow. But this time, the gates remained shut. Instead, a voice rang out from the minarets. But it wasn't the call to prayer, it was a call to war. Sultan Mahmud had done something brilliant. He had gone to the treasury and brought out the Sanjaki Sherif, the sacred standard of the Prophet Muhammad. This black flag was only unfurled in moments of existential danger to Islam. The criers ran through the streets. The Sultan has unfurled the banner of the Prophet. Every true Muslim must rally to defend the faith against the rebels. The Janissaries are no longer soldiers of Islam. They are traitors. The psychology flipped instantly. For 400 years, the Janissaries had claimed religious superiority. Now, the Sultan had outflanked them. He had excommunicated them. The people of Istanbul, the shopkeepers, the artisans, the boatmen who had been bullied and robbed by the Janissaries for decades, grabbed axes, knives, and rusty muskets. They poured into the streets, not to join the rebellion, but to crush it. The Janissaries were stunned. They retreated to their massive barracks in the Et Meidana. They barricaded the doors. They thought they were safe. They thought, "He won't dare attack the hearth. We are the Janissaries. We are the empire." Mahmud didn't send infantry. He sent artillery. He lined up the new, modern cannons on the hills overlooking the barracks. Fire. It wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. The barracks caught fire. The Janissaries were trapped inside. Those who tried to run out were cut down by the mob and the loyal troops. Those who stayed inside burned. The screams of the sons of the Sultan echoed across the city. By evening, the barracks were a smoking ruin. Thousands lay dead. The cauldrons were melted into slag. The history books call it the Vaka-i-Hayriye, the auspicious incident. Auspicious means lucky or favorable. Imagine the level of hatred required to call the massacre of 6,000 of your own soldiers a lucky event. But Mahmud wasn't done. The physical killing was just step one. He wanted total erasure. He banned the name Janissary. It was forbidden to speak it. He hunted down the survivors in the provinces. He targeted their spiritual support, the Bektashi dervishes. Their lodges were closed, their leaders executed. And then, he did something that chills the blood of historians. He went to the graveyards. If you walk through the old cemeteries of Istanbul today, you will see thousands of tall, stone turban-topped headstones. They are beautiful works of art. But if you look closely at the Janissary graves from before 1826, you will see something shocking. The heads are missing. Mahmud ordered the stone turbans to be knocked off the tombstones of dead Janissaries. He executed them in the afterlife. He wanted to wipe them from memory, damnatio memoriae. And so, the machine stopped. The drum fell silent. The harvest of children was over. But as the smoke cleared over Istanbul, a question remained. A question that hangs over this entire 400-year bloody experiment. Did it work? From a purely imperialistic standpoint, yes. The Devshirme system took the Ottoman Empire from a small dusty principality in Anatolia and turned it into a superpower that spanned 3 continents. It conquered Constantinople, Cairo, Baghdad, Budapest. It terrified the world. It proved that you could engineer a society, that you could take a human being, strip him of his identity, and rebuild him into a tool of the state. But look closer at the cost. The system was built on a lie. The lie that you can replace love with loyalty. The lie that a state can be a father. The Ottomans thought they had solved the problem of human nature. They thought that by removing biological families, they eliminated corruption. But all they did was create a new family, a desperate, traumatized, violent family that eventually ate its own parents. The Janissaries started as victims. They became victimizers, and they died as villains. Nikolas, the boy from the village, was destroyed twice. First, when they took him from his mother to make him Mahmud, and second, when they burned Mahmud in his barracks because he had become inconvenient. It is the ultimate tragedy of totalitarianism. It uses people like fuel. It burns them bright and hot to drive the engine, and when they turn to ash, it sweeps them out. Today, if you go to Istanbul, you can visit the Topkapi Palace. You can walk through the harem. You can see the heavy gates of the Enderun School. It's a museum now, quiet, beautiful. But if you listen closely, in the wind off the Bosphorus, you can almost hear it. The sound of a drum beating in a distant village. The sound of a mother screaming. The sound of a system that tried to play God and found out that hell is what you create when you succeed.